Thousands of wolves gathered beneath the ancient silver tree. They came to witness destiny. Instead, they witnessed heartbreak. Moonlight poured through the towering branches as Alpha King Riker Thorn stepped toward the sacred altar where Aurelia Everwin waited. She wore no royal jewels, only the simple silver moon ring he had given her years earlier, promising that one day the entire kingdom would watch him place its matching crown upon her head. Tonight was supposed to be that night. The elders smiled. The council stood proudly. Children sat on their parents' shoulders to witness the future king and queen unite before the moon goddess. Aurelia searched Riker's face. Something was wrong. Hours earlier, he had held her hand without speaking. He had smiled, but it never reached his eyes. She thought he was nervous. She never imagined he was terrified. Hidden within the front row, Lord Malrek Duskbane folded his hands behind his back. His expression remained calm. Only Riker noticed the almost invisible nod. A reminder: reject her, or lose everything. The forged reports still burned inside Riker's mind. Aurelia's father had supposedly betrayed the kingdom years ago. Secret meetings, rogue alliances, plans to overthrow the throne. Malrek had sworn the evidence was undeniable. If you bind yourself to her, he had warned, your enemies will use her bloodline to destroy everything you've spent your life protecting. Riker had spent the entire afternoon searching for another answer. He found none. The High Elder raised the ceremonial staff. Before the moon goddess and every pack gathered here tonight, he smiled warmly. Do you accept the bond that fate has chosen? Silence stretched between them. Aurelia reached for Riker's hand. He stepped back. The movement was small. It shattered her world. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Riker's wolf howled inside him. Rejecting a fated mate felt like tearing away part of his own soul. His chest tightened. His voice refused to come. Malrek's warning echoed again. Choose love, or bury your kingdom. Fear won. Riker lifted his head. His words echoed across the sacred grounds. I reject this bond. The world became silent. No wind, no whispers. Even the leaves above them seemed to stop moving. Aurelia stared at him, as though she no longer recognized the man standing before her. Not because he had rejected fate, because he had done it without asking whether the accusations were true, without asking her. Slowly, she looked down at the moon ring resting on her finger. The silver reflected the moonlight one final time. She slipped it free. Her hands never trembled. Neither did her voice. She stepped close enough that only Riker could hear her. You didn't reject fate tonight. A single tear escaped before she smiled sadly. You rejected the woman who would have stood beside you when everyone else walked away. She gently placed the ring into his palm. For one impossible heartbeat, Riker wanted to stop her, to ask the questions he should have asked before this moment, to tell the council they were wrong. But pride and fear had already spoken louder than love. Aurelia turned away. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't defend herself against the whispers already beginning to spread. She simply walked through the thousands who had gathered to celebrate her future. No one tried to stop her. By sunrise, her chambers stood empty. The palace announced that the future queen had abandoned the kingdom. Most believed it. Few questioned it. Far beyond the eastern gate, Aurelia crossed the old stone bridge carrying only a small satchel and the shattered remains of the life she had trusted. She never looked back. Hidden beneath the shadow of the silver tree, Lord Malrek watched her disappear into the morning mist. Slow smile crossed his face. The first move, he whispered, is complete. The kingdom recovered faster than Riker did. Within days, the council declared the moon bonding ceremony an unfortunate mistake. The nobles praised the king's wisdom. He protected the throne. He put the kingdom before his heart. Their approval echoed through every corridor of the royal palace. It sounded like victory. It felt like defeat. Every room reminded Riker of Aurelia. The library still held the maps they had marked together. planning schools for orphaned wolf children. The western training grounds still carried the grooves, where she had sparred with warriors twice her size. The moonlit balcony still overlooked the garden, where she had once laughed, because he could never remember the names of her favorite flowers. He stopped walking through that part of the palace. The memories hurt more than battles ever had. Whenever doubt crept into his thoughts, Lord Malrek arrived with another report, another witness, another sealed document bearing the royal crest. More evidence has surfaced, Malrek said one morning, placing a scroll before the king. It confirms your decision was necessary. Riker stared at the parchment. He wanted to believe it. He needed to believe it. Because if the reports were false, then he had destroyed the only person who had never lied to him. Weeks became months. The throne remained secure. His heart did not. He attended ceremonies alone, ignored every noble family offering the hand of an eligible daughter. When advisors suggested finding another mate, he dismissed them without discussion. No woman deserved to stand in the shadow of someone he still couldn't forget. Far beyond Crescent Dominion, Aurelia had crossed the Frostvale Mountains. She no longer introduced herself as the king's rejected mate. She simply called herself Leah. The villages she visited cared little about titles. They cared about harvests, medicine, and surviving winter. Aurelia treated injured hunters, delivered pups when the local healer was overwhelmed, read stories to frightened children whose parents had never returned from rogue attacks. No one knew she had once been destined for a throne. She preferred it that way. One evening, a little girl tugged gently on her sleeve. "Miss Leah?" Aurelia smiled. "Yes? Why do you always help everyone else before yourself?" The question caught her off guard. She looked toward the fading sunset before answering. "Because I know what it feels like to hope someone will." The child slipped a small wildflower into her hand. "Then someone should help you too." Aurelia looked down at the tiny blossom. For the first time since leaving the kingdom, her eyes filled with tears that weren't born from heartbreak. They came from kindness. Back inside the royal palace, Riker opened another report delivered by Malrek. His eyes narrowed. Something was wrong. One witness claimed Aurelia's father had attended a secret meeting on the 10th day of the harvest moon. Riker frowned. He remembered that date. Aurelia's father had died 3 days earlier. The report couldn't be true. He looked toward the doorway. "Bring me the witness," he ordered. The captain hesitated. After a long silence, he lowered his head. "My king." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "The witness disappeared yesterday. Snow began falling before sunrise." Aurelia adjusted the cloak around her shoulders and guided a small supply wagon along the narrow mountain road. Inside sat medicine, blankets, and dried food collected from nearby villages. Winter arrived early beyond the Frostvale Mountains. So did hunger. The refugees waiting at the next settlement had little time left. A frightened howl shattered the morning silence. The horses reared. Aurelia jumped from the wagon and followed the sound downhill. Smoke drifted through the trees. An overturned caravan lay scattered across the frozen ground. Merchants huddled behind broken wheels, while armed rogues searched the wreckage. A young mother shielded 2 children beneath the remains of a canvas cover. One rogue raised his sword. Aurelia didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fallen spear and rushed forward. "Leave them alone," the rogues laughed. "There is only one of you." She planted herself between them and the family. "Then one is enough." Steel rang against steel. She blocked the first strike, dodged the second. A third rogue circled behind her. Before his blade reached her back, a horn echoed across the valley. Hoofbeats thundered through the snow. Black-armored riders burst from the forest. Their movements were swift, disciplined, precise. The rogues scattered in panic. A towering warrior dismounted at the center of the clearing. His black cloak carried the silver wolf crest of Obsidian Kingdom. Aurelia's heartbeat quickened. Only one man wore that crest. Alpha King Soren Valkor, the monster every child had been warned about. He surveyed the battlefield without speaking. His sharp gaze settled first on the frightened children. "Get the healers. His soldiers moved immediately. One wrapped blankets around the family. Another carried an injured merchant toward the wagons. Soren ignored the fleeing rogues. They can be hunted later. He knelt beside an elderly traveler whose breathing had become shallow. "Water," he said quietly. A soldier handed him a flask. Soren lifted the man's head with surprising care. "Easy. You're safe now." Aurelia watched in stunned silence. Nothing matched the stories. There was no cruelty, no needless violence, only calm efficiency. Soren finally turned toward her. Blood stained her sleeve, where a blade had grazed her arm. "You protected strangers." She looked down. "I couldn't leave them. I know." He removed his own fur-lined cloak and placed it around her shoulders before she could protest. The gesture was practical, not intimate. "You'll freeze before we reach shelter." She searched his face for hidden motives. She found none, only quiet concern. As the refugees were escorted toward the border fortress, Soren walked beside his captain. He kept his voice low. "The woman, the one called Leah." His captain nodded. "You recognized her?" Soren glanced toward Aurelia, who was helping the frightened children climb into a wagon. "I recognized her the moment she chose their lives before her own." The captain waited. Soren's expression remained thoughtful. "Tell no one who she truly is." A cold wind swept across the valley. Ahead stood the gates of Obsidian Kingdom, the land Aurelia had feared her entire life. As they opened, frightened children ran laughing through the snow to greet returning soldiers. No one hid, no one screamed. Watching them, Aurelia felt something she hadn't expected to find beyond those mountains. Safety. Aurelia expected to leave Obsidian Kingdom within a few days. Days quietly became months. No one asked her to stay. No one asked her to leave. She simply found herself belonging. The fortress overlooking the eastern valley welcomed wolves from every corner of the continent, widows fleeing war, children separated from their packs, old warriors too injured to fight. No one was questioned before receiving food. No one was turned away because of where they came from. Aurelia spent each morning inside the infirmary. She stitched wounds, mixed medicines, held frightened pups through fevered nights. By afternoon, she visited nearby villages, teaching young healers everything she knew. Each evening, she returned exhausted. Every evening, someone had quietly left a warm meal outside her door. No note, no explanation. The first time, she assumed it was a mistake. By the 10th evening, she realized it wasn't. One rainy afternoon, she discovered the truth. Crossing the palace courtyard, she found Soren repairing a broken wooden cart beside an elderly farmer. There were soldiers nearby, craftsmen too. Yet the king knelt in the mud, tightening loose wheels with his own hands. "You could have ordered someone else," Aurelia said. Soren tested the repaired wheel before standing. "I did." She looked around. No one came? They were busy rebuilding a bridge that collapsed this morning. He wiped rainwater from his hands. This needed doing too. The answer was so ordinary that Aurelia found herself smiling. Not because it was impressive, because it was sincere. Weeks later, a frightened little boy accidentally spilled an entire pot of stew across the dining hall floor. He froze. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll leave." Aurelia recognized the look in his eyes, the expectation of punishment. Before she could reach him, Soren quietly picked up another bowl. "Good." The child blinked. "I was wondering who would help me clean this." Together, they wiped the floor. When they finished, Soren handed the boy a fresh meal. No one learns courage by being afraid of mistakes. The boy smiled for the first time that day. Aurelia carried those words with her. Winter melted into spring. Spring became summer. The nightmares that once woke her every dawn slowly disappeared. She laughed more, slept longer, stopped expecting every kindness to carry a hidden price. One evening she found a stack of unopened letters inside Soren's study. Each carried the royal seal of neighboring kingdoms. "Why haven't you answered them?" she asked. "They aren't for you. They're about you." She frowned. He opened the drawer. Every letter demanded the same thing. Return Aurelia Everwin to Crescent Dominion. She looked at him in surprise. You never told me. You had already lost enough peace. He closed the drawer. I wasn't willing to lose the rest. 5 quiet years slipped past, like seasons carried on the wind. Trust grew where fate had once failed, not because anyone promised forever, because every ordinary day gave Aurelia another reason to believe she was finally safe. One autumn evening, Soren joined her beneath the palace balcony overlooking the valley. He handed her a sealed invitation bearing the crests of every Alpha Kingdom. The Grand Sovereign Summit, she whispered. Soren nodded. Every ruler will attend. She understood immediately. Riker would be there. The life she had buried would be waiting beyond those doors. Soren looked toward the fading sunset, then back at her. I won't ask you to face your past alone. He offered his hand. Would you stand beside me? Aurelia looked at his outstretched hand. For the first time in years, the future no longer frightened her. The great doors of the Grand Sovereign Summit opened. Every conversation stopped. Kings rose from carved stone thrones. Queens lowered their goblets. Generals straightened where they stood. The silence spread across the chamber, before anyone understood why. Alpha King Soren Valkor entered first. His obsidian cloak swept across the polished floor as he walked with calm, unhurried confidence. Then the woman beside him stepped into the light. Aurelia Everwin. A collective gasp swept through the hall. No, she's alive. That's impossible. 5 years had changed everything. She no longer wore the plain dresses of a traveling healer. An obsidian and silver crown rested upon her head. Not oversized, not extravagant. It suited her with quiet elegance. She wasn't trying to prove she had survived. She no longer needed to. She simply looked like a queen. Across the chamber, Riker Thorne forgot where he was. The reports being read, the rulers speaking, the diplomats waiting. None of it mattered. His eyes never left Aurelia. She looked stronger than he remembered. Peace had softened the sadness he once placed inside her eyes. For years he had imagined asking for forgiveness. Now he wasn't certain he deserved to speak her name. Soren noticed the silence surrounding them. Without hesitation, he offered Aurelia his arm. She accepted it naturally, not as a performance, not to wound another man, because that simple gesture had become part of the life they shared. Riker looked away first. The summit continued. Border treaties were discussed, trade routes negotiated, disputes settled. When Aurelia offered advice about refugee settlements, every ruler listened. She spoke with quiet confidence, never raising her voice, never demanding attention. Respect followed her, because she had earned it. Watching her, Riker realized something painful. The woman standing before him no longer needed the future he had taken away. She had built one greater than either of them had imagined. Near the back of the chamber, an elderly woman carefully sorted bundles of aging royal records. Master Archivist Helena Voss had spent decades preserving the history of every kingdom. As she reached for an old treaty, one parchment slipped free. A faded royal seal caught her attention. She frowned. Something wasn't right. The wax belonged to Crescent Dominion. The signature beneath it belonged to Riker's late father. Yet the handwriting looked unfamiliar. Helena unfolded another document, then another. Each carried the same seal. Each signature showed tiny differences no careful scribe should ever miss. Her pulse quickened. Across the hall, Lord Malrek Duskbane noticed the growing stack of papers beside her. For the first time all day, his confident smile faltered. Helena compared the documents against an original royal decree preserved inside the archives. The difference became undeniable. Her hands trembled. Years of royal history had taught her to recognize every variation of the kingdom's official seal. Someone had altered these records. Someone powerful. She looked slowly toward Malrek. His expression remained calm. His eyes did not. Helena gathered every suspicious document into her arms and hurried toward the council platform. My kings. Her voice echoed through the silent chamber. I believe we've been reading lies for years. Every ruler turned toward her. Helena raised the forged decree with trembling hands. These signatures, she drew a slow breath, were forged. The summit hall erupted. Rulers abandoned their seats. Counselors crowded around Helena Voss as she carefully spread the aging documents across the long oak table. No one touch them, she warned. The ink will tell us more than the words. Lord Malrek remained perfectly still. Only the tightening of his jaw betrayed him. Riker stepped beside Helena. What have you found? She placed two royal decrees side by side. They appear identical. They aren't. She pointed to the royal seal. This imprint belonged to your father's reign, then to the signature, and this handwriting belongs to someone who spent years practicing his name. A murmur spread through the chamber. Forgery. Helena nodded. Masterful forgery. She unfolded another bundle. These are reports accusing Aurelia's father of aiding rogue warlords. Riker recognized them immediately. Malrek had placed those same reports before him 5 years earlier. They're false? Helena looked at him with quiet sorrow. They were created years after your future father-in-law died. The words stole the air from his lungs. That isn't possible. It is. She revealed a faded merchant ledger recovered from the royal archives. The paper used for these accusations wasn't manufactured until 3 years after his death. Silence settled over the hall. Facts carried more weight than rumors ever could. Aurelia closed her eyes. For 5 years she had wondered whether her father's name would ever be cleared. Now the truth stood in plain sight. Helena reached for one final journal. I kept this hidden, because I feared no one would believe me. Inside were payment records, large sums of gold, witness names, official seals, every payment traced back to one office, the High Chancellor. All eyes turned toward Malrek. He smiled faintly. So, you finally learned how history is written. Riker stared at him. You murdered an innocent man's reputation. I protected a kingdom. You destroyed lives. I preserved power. There wasn't a trace of regret in his voice. Only pride. Aurelia stepped forward. My father uncovered corruption, didn't he? Malrek's smile widened. He discovered nobles selling abandoned wolf territories to rogue warlords. He intended to expose us, so you killed him. He became inconvenient. The chamber recoiled. Even rulers from rival kingdoms looked horrified. Riker felt sick. Everything Aurelia had lost, every tear she had hidden, every lonely mile she had walked beyond the Frostvale Mountains, had begun with one man's ambition. But another truth hurt even more. Malrek had forged the lies. Riker had chosen to believe them. He looked toward Aurelia. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I never asked you. She met his eyes. No, you didn't. That quiet answer carried more pain than any accusation. Before another word could be spoken, a captain rushed into the hall. My kings, he bowed hurriedly. The High Chancellor's chambers are empty. A cold silence followed. Helena looked toward the open doorway where Malrek had been standing only moments before. His place was vacant. The old archivist slowly closed the journal. He knows we've found the truth. Malrek didn't escape the palace. He was waiting. When the royal guards burst into the eastern courtyard, they found him standing beside the old memorial fountain, with his hands folded behind his back. He looked almost peaceful. As expected, he said quietly. I wondered how long it would take. The guards surrounded him. He made no attempt to flee, no attempt to fight. He walked back into the summit hall, as though he still belonged there. Every ruler watched in silence. The confidence that had once commanded the room now felt hollow. Helena placed another bundle of records before the council. I searched the Chancellor's private archives. She untied the ribbon. Inside lay dozens of sealed letters. Some were addressed to paid informants. Others listed payments made to false witnesses. Every signature matched Malrek's hand. Riker picked up one trembling page. It detailed the murder of Aurelia's father. Not as an accident, as an order. His knees nearly gave way. You planned everything. Malrek met his gaze without shame. I planned survival. You planned power. The two are often the same. Aurelia stepped forward. You murdered the man who raised me. He threatened the future I intended to build. He wanted justice. He wanted change. Malrek smiled faintly. And change is dangerous. Helena revealed one final ledger. Each payment to corrupt nobles had been carefully recorded. Territories sold to rogue warlords. Villages abandoned. Families displaced. Thousands had suffered because one man valued influence more than lives. The rulers around the chamber murmured in disbelief. Even longtime allies of Crescent Dominion looked away in disgust. Riker lowered the papers. For years I believed I protected my kingdom. His voice cracked. I never realized I was protecting the man destroying it. He turned toward Aurelia. I can never repair what I did. She looked at him with quiet sadness. No, you can't. The truth hurt, because it was honest. There were wounds apologies could not erase. Malrek laughed softly. You speak as though love ever mattered. It was always fear. Fear built kingdoms. Fear kept kings obedient. Soren took one deliberate step forward. No. His calm voice silenced the chamber. Fear builds prisons. Trust builds kingdoms. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Malrek's face. He realized no one remained under his control. Not the council, not the king, not history. Desperation replaced confidence. His hand disappeared beneath his robe. Steel flashed. A concealed dagger. He lunged toward Aurelia with a roar born of panic rather than strength. Everything happened at once. Soren moved first. Riker moved second. The blade struck another blade instead of flesh. The impact echoed across the chamber. Guards rushed forward. Malrek fought wildly, not to escape, to destroy the woman who had survived every lie he had created. Soren disarmed him with one precise movement. The dagger spun across the marble floor. Riker forced Malrek to his knees. Heavy iron shackles closed around his wrists. For the first time in decades, the High Chancellor had nothing left to command. Only silence. The shackles echoed across the silent chamber. Lord Malrek Duskbane knelt before every alpha ruler in the realm. The man who had manipulated kings for decades no longer looked powerful. He looked ordinary, small, defeated. The High Elder stepped forward, carrying the ceremonial staff of judgment. Lord Malrek Duskbane. His voice filled the summit hall. You stand guilty of treason, murder, forgery, political corruption, and conspiring to destroy the moon bond through deception. Each charge struck like a hammer. You are stripped of your title, your lands, your fortune, and every honor ever granted to your name. You will spend the remainder of your life in exile. No kingdom shall offer you shelter. No council shall remember you with respect. The guards pulled Malrek to his feet. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. His legacy had vanished, not because he had been defeated in battle, because the truth had outlived his lies. When the doors closed behind him, the chamber remained silent. No one celebrated. Some victories were too painful for applause. Riker slowly walked toward Aurelia. Every step felt heavier than the last. I owe you more than an apology, he said quietly. You deserved my trust before you deserved my love. Aurelia listened without interrupting. I let fear speak for me. I believed strangers before I believed the woman who had stood beside me through every hardship. His voice trembled. No lie forced that choice. I made it. I failed you. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he never looked away. I don't ask for another chance. I only ask that you know I finally understand what I destroyed. Aurelia remained silent for a long moment. The room waited with him. Then she smiled gently, not with bitterness, with peace. The night you rejected me. She paused. I thought my life had ended. Riker lowered his head. But it didn't. It began again. She turned toward Soren. When I arrived in your kingdom, I expected another king who would ask me to prove my loyalty. Instead, Soren quietly stepped beside her. I never needed proof. He looked into her eyes. I only needed time to know your heart. Aurelia's eyes glistened. That's the difference. She faced Riker once more. You believed fear before you believed me. She reached for Soren's hand. He believed me before fear ever had the chance to speak. Their fingers intertwined naturally. Not because fate demanded it, because trust had grown there. One ordinary day at a time. Soren looked toward the moon, shining beyond the great windows, then back at Aurelia. There is something I should have asked long ago. He smiled softly. Not because destiny chose us, but because I do. He took a quiet breath. Will you marry me? The chamber became perfectly still. Aurelia looked at the man who had never asked her to earn her place beside him. The answer came without hesitation. Yes. For the first time in many years, the future felt like a promise, instead of a wound. 3 years later, the Obsidian Kingdom had become known for something no army could conquer: hope. Rejected mates found shelter within its borders. Orphaned wolf children found families instead of fear. Widows learned trades, rebuilt their lives, and discovered they still belonged somewhere. At the center of it all stood Queen Aurelia. She no longer measured her worth by the bond that had once been rejected. She measured it by every life made whole, because she refused to let heartbreak define her. Beside her, King Soren ruled as he always had. He listened before deciding, protected before judging, and every morning, before attending to matters of the kingdom, he asked Aurelia the same simple question: what do you think? It was never ceremony. It was respect, the kind she had once begged fate to give her. Across the mountains, Crescent Dominion flourished as well. Riker became a wiser king than the frightened young ruler he had once been. He questioned every accusation, demanded evidence before judgment, and reminded every young alpha that fear was never a substitute for truth. He never accepted another mate, not because he was waiting, because some promises could not be remade after they were broken. Every year, on the anniversary of the moon bonding ceremony, he visited the great silver tree alone. The moon ring Aurelia had returned rested inside a small wooden box beneath its roots. He never wore it. He never moved it. It remained where the life they almost shared had ended. One spring afternoon, a caravan from Obsidian Kingdom arrived, carrying supplies for villages recovering from a harsh winter. The wagons bore no royal banners, only the mark of a silver wolf, surrounded by open hands. Riker watched children unload blankets beside his own soldiers. There was no rivalry, only people helping people. Later that evening, Aurelia and Soren walked through the sanctuary gardens as dozens of children chased one another beneath blooming trees. A little girl stopped in front of Aurelia. Your Majesty? Aurelia knelt to meet her eyes. Yes? Were you always this happy? Aurelia smiled softly. No. The child frowned. What changed? Aurelia glanced toward Soren, who was helping 2 boys repair a broken wooden cart. Then she looked back at the little girl. I stopped waiting for someone else to choose me. The child considered those words carefully before slipping her tiny hand into Aurelia's. I choose you. Aurelia laughed through unexpected tears. So do I. As the sun disappeared beyond the mountains, Soren quietly wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them was built on trust, not uncertainty. Far away, Riker stood beneath the towering silver tree, one final time, before returning to his palace. He looked toward the evening sky and whispered the only words that still mattered. I hope you're happy. The wind stirred the silver leaves above him. There was no answer. There didn't need to be. Because somewhere beyond those mountains, the woman he had once rejected was living the life she had chosen, surrounded by people who never asked her to prove she deserved to be loved. And across every werewolf kingdom, parents told the story of the king who lost his destined mate, not because fate failed him, but because fear spoke louder than trust. The lesson endured through generations. The greatest relationships are not destroyed by enemies. They are destroyed the moment fear replaces honest conversation. Trust is not proven when life is easy. It is proven when doubt is loudest. Sometimes, the person you lose is not taken by fate, but by a choice you can never undo.